humanitarian conditions in southern Gaza, which have been growing increasingly dire. This as Israel is now urging Palestinian civilians to leave their homes for ever-shrinking patches of land. Israel's military is fighting close-quarter battles with Hamas fighters in Khan Yunis, the region's largest city. Hundreds of thousands of Gazans have been fleeing to areas west and south of the embattled city of Khan Yunis. Israel's push into southern Gaza has now raised new fears for the masses of civilians crowding into this area, many of whom fled bombardment and battles in the north after Israel urged them to do so. Gazans say there is no reliably safe place to go, as Israel now wants them to flee specific neighborhoods in the south. The UN says that its shelters are also beyond capacity. Meanwhile, rockets continue to be fired from the enclave into central Israel. In the latest, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has shared that he had heard stories of sexual abuse at a meeting with hostages returned by Hamas. He called on women's and human rights organizations to act on it, stating that they did not hear their outrage. Netanyahu's reaction comes soon after an event at the UN headquarters on Monday that highlighted eyewitness accounts of sexual violence against women perpetrated by Hamas during the October 7 assault. Listen in to what Israel's Prime Minister has to say.
I say to the women's rights organizations, to the human rights organizations, you've heard of the rape of Israeli women? Horrible atrocities, sexual mutilation? Where the hell are you? I expect all civilized leaders, governments, nations to speak up against this atrocity.
The situation is getting worse by the hour. I mean, like, there's intensified bombing going on all around, including here in the southern areas, Khan Yunis, and even in Rafah. Even what I've seen over the last couple of days, that we see an vastly increasing number of IDPs coming from the so-called middle area, and even now the southern areas towards furthermore to the south.
Let's try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of where this battle now by Israel is reaching as far as Gaza is concerned, also those eyewitness accounts. And for that, let me introduce my guest today. I'm joined in by Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, who's an IDF spokesperson, joins me live right now. Many thanks to you, Lieutenant Colonel, for joining in. Now, we all know that fighting has now shifted to south of Gaza, with the epicenter being Khan Yunis. Two parts to my question. A, how much has Israel gained in its goal of wiping out Hamas? And secondly, how is Israel ensuring the safety of Palestinians who, as we all know, are now being used as human shields by Hamas, whether it's schools, hospitals, even mosques?
Indeed, the IDF is operating across the Gaza Strip. We continue our operations in the north that are still not completed, but also conducting operations in southern Gaza, specifically around the Khan Yunis area and circling Khan Yunis. We are every day engaging the enemy, seeking them out wherever they are, making sure that they can no longer ever hold the power of government, the power of the terrorist activities that they conducted on the 7th of October. Indeed, I would say that the operation is moving in accordance to our plan, with two core goals in mind. First of all, dismantling and destroying Hamas as a governing authority, an authority that utilized the powers of government to build a terrorist army that came into our homes, came into our villages, came into our farms. And second of all, operating and engaging in order to bring home the hostages, every last one of them.
Lieutenant Colonel Lerner, whether it's the US President or the Vice President of the United States, we've heard consistent US calls urging Israel to respect international humanitarian law regarding Palestinians, while they've also reiterated Israel's rights to defend itself against Hamas. Are the Biden administration's own foreign policy goals in the Arab world sort of adding to Israel's military and moral dilemma?
I am an IDF spokesperson, so I will relate to what the IDF is doing. Of course, we are operating within the realm of the laws of armed conflict. That is a guiding principle, the principles of distinction, the distinction between civilians, non-combatants, and the terrorists That is a guiding principle. And the second principle, I would say, is the military necessity of every single target. So when we combine those two together, we get the actions of the IDF which are being conducted. And indeed, both we are listening and very attentive to what the administration, the US administration, is telling us. And indeed, we are improving and engaging in order to limit civilian strife and civilian casualties in the realm of our war against Hamas. But nevertheless, the administration is also very, very strong in its words, its message that Hamas has to go. So we're in complete agreement, and I would say there is no daylight. We are also perhaps I can share with you that we are including in our actions on the ground lessons learned from the US military activities in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. So we are learning, and I would say we're also improving on those. So we have a very good, strong ability to distinguish between the civilians and the terrorists. And that's despite the fact, as you pointed out, how Hamas has chosen the battleground. They have built for the last 16 years a huge network of terrorist infrastructure beneath schools, as you said, using hospitals, mosques, houses, buildings, kindergartens, scout clubhouses. These are the places we're finding their rockets, their infrastructure, their tunnel capabilities, and this is where they are attacking us from. So of course, it poses a huge challenge for any professional military in this day and age. And I would say it's the battleground is an unprecedented battleground from any Western military perspective in the world, and no war against a terrorist organization has ever been conducted in the circumstances and conditions that Israel is facing today.
Lieutenant Colonel, we've just heard the reaction from the Israeli Prime Minister, where he's condemned sexual violence against women that was perpetrated by Hamas. Also on Monday at an event in the UN headquarters in New York, horrific accounts of sexual violence against women by Hamas during the October 7 attacks were shared. Prime Minister Netanyahu, as we all said, has also alleged global indifference. It was only in December for a first time that UN women condemned Hamas's crimes against women. As the IDF spokesperson, do you believe that the international community at large has mostly glossed over widespread sexual violence against women?
The IDF is concerned with the well-being of all of our hostages, all of the hostages that are being held in the clutches of Hamas. We've demanded that the international community, and specifically the International Committee of the Red Cross, have access to assess their well-being. Indeed, we have to bring home the hostages, every last one of them. And that is one of our war goals. That is exactly what we intend to do. At this stage, I would say the diplomacy around the international community, we would leave that to the diplomats while we continue our war efforts with the war fighters.
Also, some eyewitness accounts have shared gory details of women being shot in their private parts, mutilation of body parts as well. Do Israeli officials have a rough estimate of how many women were sexually assaulted or mutilated on October 7? Could you share some ground accounts?
So I don't want to talk about the victims. There are too many victims to even try and describe the atrocities conducted against more than 1,200 people butchered and murdered and massacred and mutilated, beheaded on the 7th of October attack. The IDF is involved now in making sure that the 7th of October never happens again.
Also, let's talk about the intelligence failure. Now, Lieutenant Colonel, there's been a detailed report in the New York Times which talks about how Israel knew Hamas's attack plan more than a year ago. They've reviewed a detailed blueprint. The approximately 40-page document is in fact titled Jericho Wall. It outlines point-by-point plan of how Hamas was meant to attack Israel on October 7th. I'd like your thoughts on this report.
So, of course, we are conducting now our war against Hamas. There are many lessons that will have to be learned from the failures of the IDF on the 7th of October. The IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, has taken personal responsibility, as has the head of the Internal Security Agency. Our perspective now is the time to fight. There will be a time to learn lessons, to see what happened, what went wrong, what intelligence was missed or misled or misread, and how to make sure that it never happens again. These things will happen, but they will happen after we've completed our mission of dismantling and destroying Hamas, and after we've brought back the hostages.
Let's also now discuss the growing discrimination against Jews. On Tuesday, a U.S. House of Representatives committee grilled the presidents of Ivy League institutions that included Harvard University president, the president of the University of Pennsylvania, and even the MIT on their efforts to combat anti-Semitism in the university premises. Many believe that Jewish students in these campuses are afraid to be themselves. What, in your view, explains this growing discrimination against Jews?
So I really can't comment on that beyond, of course, Israel has the right to self-defense. We need to be able to defend ourselves, and Jews, and we need to be able to feel safe and secure here in Israel. And Jews have to feel safe and secure everywhere else around the world, disregarding or without any context to what Israel is and how Israel is conducting itself. People need to be safe. They need to feel that they have governments that represent them and represent their interests, especially when they are under fire or under attack.
All right. Lieutenant Colonel Lana, how do you respond to the rhetoric of anti-Semitism and the fact that anti-Semitism currently is being weaponized by Israel to justify their war in Gaza?
I think anybody that looked and saw what happened on the 7th of October and is trying to find any other excuse should first look himself in the mirror and have a very, very internal, deep, self-searching understanding of what actually went wrong.